in terms of look for location, look for like if they're looking for a bigger college, a small college, a far one, a one close by, one that has specific programs. So it's a very useful tool for students to use in order to determine or look for colleges that meet the criteria that they're looking for, as well as majors. They can also track to see if they are on track for A through G. So A through G are the requirements that they have to meet for courses that they need to take in order to apply to four-year colleges, such as the CSUs, San Jose State, and the UC system, such as UC Santa Cruz, UC Berkeley. And so we will be using that program with them a lot next year. There's also various assessments that they can use, like career interest, personality assessment, and all really it's to help them make those decisions and narrow down their career pathway.
I think the other thing that we kind of touched on last night in our presentation is that there's a lot of things that students could be doing, already now as juniors, to prepare for next year. For example, the college essay questions, colleges already have their things kind of posted, especially if they're applying to private colleges and universities, they have a lot of them will use the common application. And so students can already kind of look at some of those essay questions and start brainstorming different ideas and ways that they might want to respond. They can kind of familiarize themselves with different applications, even though they might not be applying yet, just kind of starting to wrap their heads around like what those processes look like. And, also kind of putting together a list of different places or schools that they might want to apply to based on what maybe their career interests are. So there's a lot of things, that already junior year that are happening for students, not just the academic side of things in classes, but outside those classroom walls to help them prepare for next year. Okay, so we do have some questions coming in. So somebody had mentioned that they attended the presentation. Just have a few follow-up questions, like, for example, the cost of each application. How many applications should students apply or complete? And the different acceptance rates as well. So the cost of the application is going to vary depending on where they apply. For the UC system, I want to say that's like around $70, maybe $80, I think, per
For the
application.
CSU system, it's $70 per application.
UC is 80.
And that would be per campus. So if they, apply to 3 different UCs, then that is going to be multiplied. Same for the CSU system. Private schools might have different rates depending on where they apply. Also, the acceptance rate, many times colleges and universities will post that kind of information on their websites in terms of their fall class and what the acceptance rate was for that particular class. Schools are pretty transparent about that information. And I think we also had that linked in our presentation as well. It's kind of like the fall freshman profile for the UC system. I know that was linked in there. And I think
I just put in the freshman admissions profiles for the UC system, so you can kind of compare the different UCs and what their average admissions are, and including like the GPA, the overall admit rate. So take a look at that. So, and we always encourage students to apply to various schools. So I know a lot of students kind of tend to focus on just the UCs and then don't do anything else. And so when they sometimes don't get accepted into the one that they really wanted or the ones they wanted, then they really had no plan B. So we really encourage them to apply to different schools. So like a safe school that they know that they will get into, some target schools and reach schools. So schools that they know that they can get into, schools that they meet the eligibility for, so that they are within that competitive pool. And then schools that maybe they meet the eligibility requirements, but it's really competitive and it's maybe like a dream school or very impacted school. So just it's good for them to have a variety of options. Community college is always a great option, especially right now that they have the California Promise Grant for students that submit a financial aid application and meet the income ceiling. They can always do their 2 years there and then transfer to a UC or a CSU. There are agreements with both of those college systems where if a student meets the requirements and fulfills all the transfer units, that they are guaranteed a spot at one of their schools. Obviously, the ones that are more impacted are not part of that, but they are guaranteed a spot. So and the GPA to transfer from a community college to a 4-year is lower. So it's always a great option as well. So there's some questions coming in. Is 10 applications too many? No, I think that's like I said, it maybe 10 to just the UC system would not be recommended, but having 10 all together in various like including a private school, CSUs, UCs, or maybe some out-of-state schools would be a good thing to do so that there is variety.
I'm glad to answer the next one. So somebody asked about the activities and awards section, specifically educational prep programs. So the classes that you're referring to would typically go under, I would imagine, other coursework. However, really what they're looking for is what they've done here in high school. So you mentioned that she did that from kindergarten until 9th grade, but this is like pretty specifically asking for what they've done during their time in high school. Hopefully that makes sense. And then some of the prep programs, things like Avid, or if they're in another like program like that maybe is on the high school campus. Other schools may have like partnership programs, like DCAC is one, things along those lines. Those would be considered an educational prep program. Is there any other examples of those that you guys can think of off the top of your head?
Like any of those pre-college kind of programs during the summertime that students participate in, like Cosmos through the UC system or MITES through MIT. So yeah, a lot of different pre-college kind of programs, those would go in there too. Yeah, I think the more that students can do any sort of like leadership opportunities that they do and that they're able to present on applications, just kind of shows colleges and universities that they're like a well-rounded kind of person and that they are going to bring more, bring more to the campus other than just that academic side of things. So I just posted, hopefully it worked in here. I just posted a document in here that shows the data for PHHS students that graduated in 23 that applied to the UC system and like the different numbers of applications that they completed, how many were accepted or admitted. And I think it has the GPA information as well. So something to take a look at in your own time, if you would like to get kind of an idea of how our students did in terms of applying to the UC system. Capturing that data for the CSU system was not as easily attainable. So, but this is just something to kind of help give you an idea. Any other questions that people have? And I think the important thing too for students and families to know is that there's support along the way, that as we do, we get into senior year, having those application workshops for students, the help is there if students take advantage of it. And so, when any students who plan to apply to any CSUs, we'll have a special application workshop just for that particular system. And, same thing, we'll do the same thing for the UC system. And so, and private schools as well. And then community colleges will have those application workshops in the springtime. So there's always an opportunity for students to get that help as they are kind of navigating those applications and have, specific questions. And so they're, we're with them the whole step of the way. So.
And I posted something similar to what you posted, Ms. Miller Cody, for CSUs, but something to keep in mind is that it's actually 2 school years behind. So just something to consider, but you have to kind of scroll down. So first it gives data across the entire like system. And then if you scroll down, you can like type in the name of the high school if you're interested in learning more about specific high schools. But because they're public schools, they do have to provide this information. It's public knowledge. So that's why you're able to find information like this readily available online.
What would your advice be for a student with no major? So what would our advice be to a student who's undecided about their major? What's the best course of action? An interesting thing I tell students many times is that half the students that go to college are like they go there with a major in mind. The other half, they apply to colleges, they're undecided. So those who sometimes go to college with a major in mind, they end up changing it anyway. And so I think there's a lot of pressure sometimes for students to really have it narrowed down about what they might want to major in. And I think that's difficult because their exposure to courses is, only kind of what we have here, maybe, minus a few courses outside of school too. But there are so many different classes that they can take in their freshman year to help kind of expand their horizons and discover some of their interests and maybe what they might want to pursue. So I encourage students that even if they don't have a particular major in mind, that's okay. Like, they'll take some classes in the first year of college and, kind of start to form those ideas and opinions about what they do want to pursue. And I know that as parents that kind of hits the pocketbook a little bit too. You don't necessarily want to be exploring, maybe about what you want to major in, but students can also go to community colleges and kind of get that experience as well and, take different courses to help them make that decision down the road. But many students apply to colleges as, undeclared or undecided. And even that even not having that as a major, like putting that on an application, even, schools that are impacted there too. So I just tell them to kind of just, take some classes and find out what they enjoy and start forming those ideas too in their first year of college.
And having exposure to, let's say, like internships or job shadowing is always a good idea, because sometimes students have this idea in mind, or, this vision of what they want to do, but then they don't really know like the nuances of what really is entailed in going into that field. Like right now, everybody wants to do STEM, everybody wants to do engineering. But then once they really go in there and see, oh, you have to talk to people all day long, that's like, I don't really like to do that. And then they start seeing, oh, it's not really what I thought it was. And so the sooner they can realize those things, like what really goes into being a doctor, an engineer, a professor, whatever they choose, the better, because a lot of the times they spend so much time and money and energy and obviously resources going into a field that they think they want, only to find out later that it doesn't really match like their life vision or like their personality. And those are the type of people that later go to work and hate their job, right? So we don't want that for our students. So that's another reason why we really encourage them to go to the CCGI portal, the college career portal, because there are a lot of assessments in there that can help them kind of tease out those things, like their personality, what they're like, and they will recommend careers for them that they can then explore further. So that would be also a good starting point for students who kind of don't really know if what they want to do or don't really know what their interests are. There's also a career interest profiler there that they can do, and it helps narrow down their career interests. So then they have something to work off of, and then be able to then tease out, okay, well, I don't like maybe the business side, I like more, maybe my brain is more analytical and I like to analyze data. So maybe I should go into a field that does that. So it's really important for them to really get to know their strengths, their weaknesses, their interests, their values, because that will be, I think, a key point in kind of guiding them into that direction. And then once they kind of tease that out, then they can try maybe a community college class in a field that they scored high in career interest to kind of dig deeper and further in it and see if it's really something that they're interested in and kind of go from there.
Somebody had asked for the CCGI link, and so Miss IC posted the California College's CCGI link in our chat. That would be the public access, but your students would be able to access CCGI through their ARMS account.
Somebody was asking if it's easier to get admitted into UC if you apply undeclared, since so many majors are impacted, or is it not recommended? If the majors are impacted, it will be, I think, and I'm not an expert on this, but it will be difficult for them to get in, even if they go as undeclared. So keep that in mind. That's why it's important for them to apply to other colleges where maybe their potential major that they're interested in is not impacted, because if that's something that they really want to do, the chances of them being able to get into that major are going to be, tough. So applying to a school where maybe the major's not as impacted would be, and that's something that we covered yesterday in the presentation as well. We had a CSU, let me look for it, which lists the impact. I'll post it on the chat. Posts the impacted majors at the different CSUs. So for example, if everybody's trying to do, the example that we gave yesterday was biology, but then Fullerton, Long Beach, LA, Pomona, they're all impacted in biology. So then we would recommend that the student apply to other colleges where biology is not impacted, such as East Bay or Bakersfield, just to increase their chances of being able to get into the major they want, even if they go, undeclared. But then that does, engineering, all the STEM and medical majors tend to be impacted pretty much everywhere, but there are some schools that are not as popular or further away, or UC Merced, Bakersfield. So
I also want to add to that I think that even if a student applies as an undeclared major, their chances of getting in also depend on the impaction of the school itself. So, like if you apply as an undeclared major to Berkeley versus undeclared to, Riverside, there might be a difference in a student being admitted. So that can also be the impaction of the school itself is also something to consider. Someone just asked, do the UCs look at a student's state test scores? So like the test scores that we just took last week, whether or not the UCs take that into consideration for admissions. They don't look at those state test scores. The UCs and CSUs don't look at that information. However, how a student does on the state testing can impact, for example, in the CSU system, whether or not they're able to go into college level English or college level math right away. So it could, those scores can impact not necessarily the admissions decision, but it could help with, course placement later on down the road.
somebody was asking what impacted means. So impacted means when a college receives more applications than there is space. So like in the UCs, the popular ones that they receive a lot of applications for UC Berkeley, UCLA, and San Jose State is actually also impacted. So they're receiving way more applications than there are spots for students. So that's what that means.
So somebody is asking, as they have a freshman here in school, and whether or not the SAT is required. So the SAT is not required for admissions. The UCs and CSUs are no longer using the SAT or the ACT in making admissions decisions. Private schools, for the most part, are not using that for admissions either, but we do encourage students and families to, if there's, certain private colleges and universities they're interested in, to double check to see whether or not they are or are not using that information. Additionally, SAT scores can be used though for course placement, just like I was mentioning before with the state test scores in terms of the CSU system. Some schools might be using the SAT to help determine whether or not a student can go into college level English or college level math. But for admissions purposes, no, they're not looking at that.
They only look at them after they've been admitted in order to support with that. But we have been, or at least I get a lot of emails from, and I know I was talking to one of my colleagues about that the other day, that I have been getting emails from different universities saying, we will start using the SAT, ACT again for admissions purposes in, for example, starting 2025. So we do offer it to juniors free of cost so that they do have an opportunity to take it at that time. So just something to think about. Right now, the CSUs and the UCs have not been using them. I don't know whether or not they will move again to that later. And a lot of the private colleges haven't either, but there are some that use it. And so who knows, maybe later they will be using them. So we encourage students to take it and take advantage of taking it here their junior year, since it is paid for by the district. So, and they can always take it on their own later on if they want to, outside of FEMA.
Any other questions? Ooh, the cost of the SAT. Well, I guess because students can take it in their junior year for free. I have not looked at the cost of the SAT because I guess no one has been taking it really.
I think it's like $60 or so.
Yeah, and I know if students if they qualify for free or reduced lunch, they might be able to get either take it for free or have a waiver for it.
And we recommend or we suggest that students use Khan Academy for SAT preparations. So if your student is interested in taking it anytime soon, or maybe next year, that's a good resource for them to use is the Khan Academy SAT prep.
Somebody asked whether or not taking ERWC, that would be like a senior level English course that we have, whether or not taking ERWC helps in college course placement for the UC or maybe CSU system. Well, because students do have to have 4 years of English taking, they are required to take an English course in their senior year. In their senior year, they do have some options. They could take ERWC or an AP, English course. But for the CSU system, depending on how students do an ERWC, they are able to qualify or go right into a college level English course. So that's one of the benefits for like the CSU system is taking that particular class, because the curriculum for that class was essentially, approved or so, approved by the CSU system. So that means if a student does well in that course, they can go into a college level English course. But another way that they could do that too is by demonstrating through, the state test scores that they met that requirement. The UC system, I mean, I think that they just have to essentially, take an English course in their senior year and meet those A to G requirements as well. So somebody mentioned something about Khan Academy. One of the nice things about Khan Academy is that if a student does take SAT, they can link their results up with Khan Academy, and then they can get tutoring or online tutoring kind of tailored to the areas on the SAT that they maybe didn't do so well in. So yeah, it does look a little hard.
I mean, the SAT is a hard test, so. Is there anything else? Any other questions, concerns?
Somebody asked whether or not can you only report good AP scores to UCs? So for example, not necessarily wanting to report the ones in which students don't do well. So we've always been told by admissions, UC admissions representatives that a student, posting their scores for their AP tests or any test, posting their scores it's only going to add value to an application, not necessarily detract value. Now, that's what they tell us, whether or not, on their end when they're evaluating applications, if that's what actually, transpires. But that's what we share with students, that sharing those scores, it just adds value to the application. Because I think the other side of that is if a student sits in a class, an AP class for the entire year, and they take the AP exam and then decide not to share those results, I guess a college or university is kind of left to conclude maybe they didn't do well, or they would kind of wonder, well, why did a student take this class the entire year and then not take the test? And so I just recommend for students to post those AP scores. There's, like I said, we've been told that there's no harm in doing so. It doesn't detract value from their application. I don't know if counselors wanted to add anything to that, if they've heard the same.
Somebody was asking how many times a student can take the SAT. There's not a specific time or a number of times that they are a limit. But if they're not happy with their score and they want to try to do better, then they can take it, more than 2 or 3 times. Unfortunately, if you want to pay $60 every time they take it, that's also, have to consider that as well, because it is $60 every time they take it. The students generally do take it, I would say maybe 2 times around there, 2, 3 times. It's kind of like the average, I would say.
I think that definitely used to be the case, more so historically. Now, I don't know.
Yeah, now that the UCs and CSUs are not using it for admissions, yeah, that number might be 0 or 1, so.
I guess the other thing too is if a student is thinking about taking the SAT, they could also explore taking the ACT as well. I know that's not as common here, but they might have, just might test differently with that particular test too. And schools do tend to take either one. Any other questions or comments? Any other burning things? Hopefully everyone's student is getting ready for their senior year and kind of has a good idea about where they want to go to school or what they want to do after high school.
Yeah, so it's in regards to the SAT, just continuing the conversation. Sometimes people think, oh, well, the more they take it, the better they'll be. But yes, sometimes the score does go down. Sometimes they end up getting the best scored at the first or first try. So taking it more times does not necessarily equate to score improvement for some people. So keep that in mind.
And I also think it depends too, like on that test day, maybe the first time they take it, they're feeling okay, they're well rested, they, eat something in the morning before taking the test, and maybe the second attempt, they didn't sleep well the night before, they're feeling kind of sick. All those different variables can factor in there too. And so, but yeah, generally speaking, I think students, if they keep taking it a number of times, they don't do
Or
necessarily better.
because they already know the format of the test and they know how long it is. It's kind of like the sense of overwhelmingness that just, it's like, oh, I have to sit here for 3 hours. And so because I've already gone through it, it sets a different expectation and tone. So somebody's asking about ERWC. So they students when they're applying to the CSU system, California State University, like San Jose State, they do report their first their junior grades. Then at the end they do submit a transcript where they will then check the grades and then place them accordingly to their ERWC grade. So that comes at the end with their transcript. Anything else?
Oh, I like this question. Somebody asked whether or not classes that if students were to take, as juniors right now, if they were to take classes in this coming summer, does that count as 11th grade GPA? And the answer is yes. So if a student takes a course in the summertime, that can count toward 11th grade GPA.
Somebody was asking if a student drops down from a course during the school year and tries to make it up during the summer, then do you take the average or best score in that object? So both of the grades stay, assuming that they're taking that class here at Piedmont over the summer. Both of the grades will appear in the transcript and both will be used for the GPA calculation. Now, if they take it outside of Piedmont, let's say at a community college, then if it's a class that is required for A through G or high school graduation, we do post that on our transcript. But if it's not, like if it's a math analysis class, so that is beyond the minimum math requirement, which is math 3 is a minimum, then we wouldn't necessarily post it on our transcript. And at that point, then it wouldn't affect the GPA calculation here. However, students do have to report any courses that they take outside of Piedmont, community college classes included. And then the colleges, the universities will then calculate that into their overall GPA and use the weighted GPA. So it is
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, like if a student, we get this question sometimes from students, if they end up getting like a C in a class, sometimes they want to retake that. And it's a difficult conversation to have with them sometimes because I know at the UC system, for example, if a student repeats a class, if the student gets a D or F and they repeat the class, then the UC system, will take the higher grade that they get as long as it's a C or higher. And if they happen to get a C the first time around in a class and they want to repeat it, the UC system, they still will only take the first attempt in which a student gets a C or higher. So making it up, they're going to look at that piece of information too.
So the A through G GPA, because A through G includes some classes in 9th grade, they will, for example, they need 4 years of English. One of those years is their freshman year. So it will include also some freshman courses. So there's this misconception that freshman year doesn't matter or senior year doesn't matter. They do matter in the overall admissions process. because they are looking at A through G courses that are taken within those years, 9 through 12.
But if they're just looking at are they asking the question about the calculation of the GPA for A through G purposes? If that's the case, then that's the 10 through 11 GPA. But overall coursework has to be from all 4 years, if that makes sense. So a C or lower, like a lower than a C in a freshman class will still make them ineligible for A through G. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. So an A through G grade is any course that's considered to be A through G approved, which is courses, the majority of the courses that we offer here at the high school. The only classes that wouldn't count towards that, basically like that GPA that we're referring to are typically things like PE and maybe like 1 or 2 other courses that we offer on our campus. But the majority of the coursework that we offer here does count towards A through G or like 4-year college eligibility and towards that GPA. And if
So
you're
it
looking,
means,
if you're looking at our transcript, all the classes that have like a letter P right in front of it is considered a college prep class. So that would be considered an A through G course, and that counts towards that GPA. That's kind of the way that you can determine it if you're like not sure. But like I said, the majority of our courses do count there.
And the other part of that, when we talk about those A to G requirements, so there's the A to G courses, and then part of those requirements too are that students earn a grade of C or higher in those particular courses.
recommendations for summer opportunities. I don't know if some of you were able to attend our summer school or got a chance to review the email that was sent out about summer school opportunities outside of Piedmont. So I'm going to link the presentation here. And we go through some programs that students can access to for enrichment. So for classes that they want to explore, as like we were talking about, that career kind of major search exploration, and if they want to take classes during the summer, they can certainly do so. So in that presentation, we go over certain programs that are available, such as community college, Silicon Valley High School, and so forth.
And we also included a slide in our presentation last night of different ideas of things for students to kind of do this summer. Like we said, mentioning giving them an opportunity, they can kind of start thinking about their college essays and formulating some ideas. Even looking for different like internship opportunities, the city of San Jose sometimes has things for high school students. Maybe even looking through the county. I encourage students, talk to their parents' place of employment. Maybe there's an opportunity to do some shadowing, just talking to different people, about their interests. If a student wants to go into a particular field, maybe reaching out to someone to see if they could shadow that day or something. So maybe, some students work during the summertime to try to get some experience working, get a little bit of cash to help, with college costs.
So somebody's asking about the deadline for summer school outside of Piedmont. So you would have to check with that particular school to see when their summer session starts and then apply before that. Most of the community colleges are starting around, their summer programs start at the beginning of June. So plan to enroll before then.
We do ask students to complete a Google form, and I can post that in the presentation here. If a student is thinking about taking a course outside of Piedmont Hills, we would want them to fill out a Google form. It's like a pre-approval form, just to make sure that the course that they're taking, that they meet the prerequisites for that course, and also if that would have any impact on their schedule for next year. And I think that link, I can find that one and post that.
And then to answer the next question about whether taking a course, any courses during senior year, will it affect the weighted GPA? It will not, because students, as you mentioned in your question, students will submit CSU and UC applications by November 30th. So they will actually not be able to include any of their actual letter grades from senior year within the application process. However, that's why when we say the GPA requirement is grade 10 through 11 is because they wouldn't have any grades yet from senior year by the time they submit this application. However, once they do get accepted, their GPA can't fall below a certain number. So it's just really important that they keep that in mind. Then there are different things that they do mention to students when it comes to completion of A through G and continuing to keep that GPA, you know, where it has been the entire time. Once they receive their preliminary acceptance, like in typically like February, March of their senior year. So hopefully that makes sense. So it won't affect the overall application GPA, but they do have to keep their GPA at a certain level based on where they actually apply and plan to attend. And they'll receive a final transcript once they graduate. The colleges will, once you send it to where you're planning to go. So they will see and confirm that everything that was inputted into the application initially during that process in the fall semester is accurate once they actually graduate. So hopefully that helps answer that question.
All right, any other questions? Okay, and as always, if there's any, any questions that you have regarding academics, college applications, anything, feel free to reach out to your student's counselor. Our information is posted on our website, and you can email your student's counselor to get those questions answered. So if there's no other questions, though, I think hopefully this information, hopefully you found it helpful, especially as we get ready to navigate senior year. It's definitely an adventure. So thank you for joining us this morning. And again, as you have questions that come up, please feel free to reach out to us. So with that,
Best of luck to all the rising seniors next year.
there you go. All right, thank you. Take care, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye.